Holy Reckoning gives you a lot of choices. You can 1v1 very easily. You can definitely heal any dungeons. You can arguably raid since you can pick up Sanctuary Blessing. You don't really you lose 5 plus crit to healing, but you bring something to the raid that Deep Holy Paladins can't bring. It's one of the better pre-made specs. It's possibly the best pug spec if you want to do pugging battlegrounds. I mean, it can tank 5-mans, and if you have the right gear selection, you can almost kill anybody with a Holy Reckoning build. And it can realistically, without getting any crits, hit for 4,000 or 5,000 damage. That 4,000 or 5,000 damage too, that's really in pretty soft gear. I mean, I know it can get higher, so as you can see, like these examples, I purposely geared down a little bit, and there's not a lot of spell power in the game yet, and yet I can still hit pretty hard for a person that has 0 points in retribution. So, which is really good for mining gold. Like part of this build, I think you should go around in plus healing gear, and you should wear a shield and heal the majority of the time, especially in organized PvP. But having high burst damage is extremely useful for farming gold, as you can one-shot someone who's trying to take your thorium vine or vein or whatever. So I'm going to make an obscure reference point. One of my favorite YouTubers is Skolo Gladiatoria. I don't know if I'm pronouncing that totally right. It's hard to say. Where he covers medieval weapons and armor, and he goes into great nuance. And one of the things you should take from that channel when it's talking about real medieval weapons and armor is the level of nuance. Like, it's not really like, this is the best sword, this is the best armor, and really WoW is no different. Like, there is so much nuance, and there's so much for me to cover, and that's part of the reason why I wanted to make this whole channel and stuff. But I guess where I'm going with this is let's go ahead and talk about specific stuff for Holy Reckoning. Like, there's the obvious in combat healing, which like Lawbringer redemption armor for PvP, really great suits for in combat healing, pretty blatantly obvious. I mean, even tier 2, I mean, even with its spell power, still has a lot of plus healing. And with Holy Reckoning, you can turn on the dime and really hit someone really hard. And relatively low competition since it's only PvP gear for some of those item pieces, which is really nice. Like, you might be in a Blackwing Lair guild and like half the paladins like, oh, I don't really care about tier 2, I want the maximum plus healing. I want to give you one example of how crazy nuanced the game is when we're talking about itemization. Okay, so let's say you're like hardcore DPS, 400 plus spell power, I shouldn't say DPS, burst damage, Holy Reckoning Paladin. Well, you still might want a suit of redemption, even for dueling. And it's like, well, why would I? I mean, it's great tier, but it doesn't really fit my overall plan. And I was like, well, think of it like this: let's say you're fighting a warlock. This is a perfect example. You get that 8-piece redemption, and every time you cleanse yourself, you're healing and stuff. So what you do is you wear the all plus healing suit early on, then you just you run out of combat, and then you switch to your spell sour suit. You don't lose any of your reckoning stacks. So you come back in, you sit there and you have a mana fight in your redemption suit, and then when he's like, "Well, this isn't really working," he starts drinking. You get out of combat. You come back in before he's all the way topped off. You come back in with your 2.5 and your handed rag or whatever, and you just like hit the guy for 6k health, and they're like, "What the hell just happened?" Well, that you don't lose your stacks when you go out of combat, so that's a very realistic example of how to use gear that people would not normally consider valuable to this specific build. Okay, so some of the obscure items that work really well with spell reckoning. There's the obvious one. Tier 2, tier 2.5, obvious. Obscure items. The ZG necklace in conjunction with the Nomus Death Ray. You can get a Death Ray shot off without the ZG necklace, without that extra 0.5 seconds, but it just makes it so much easier, honestly. That being said, the Death Ray itself, you have 0 points in retribution. You wreck bomb someone, and then you Death Ray them. Kill pretty strong characters before they really get to move. I would say some of the most important items are stuff like the Maelstrom trinket from the Darkmoon Fair, Wormthalic Tongue from LBRS. These kind of proc on hit items are insane. Insane. And then like the Blood Drinker from AQ has an amazing spell power ratio. A lot of one-handers have spell power ratios depending on what server you're playing on. They become extremely broken with Holy Reckoning builds. For dueling purposes, I'm absolutely in love with the Skullforged Reaver. It has an amazing spell power ratio when you consider the fact that it procs every freaking second, and it's not just damage, it's actually a life tap. With Holy Reckoning and group organized PvP, I would definitely do like a plus healing enchants and stamina. And then like if you're kind of more of a pug player, I would go lifesteal on my weapon. Not Crusader. I do think Crusader is better for most command builds, seal command, but lifesteal is probably best, or maybe the spell power enchant to your two-hander, or even a lot of one-hander builds for pugging. It's really, really strong. It procs like a freaking machine gun. More obscure stuff. Well, of course, if you're going to wreck bomb someone with spell power and seal of righteousness, the Zandalar hero charm or the ZG trinket, of course, is amazing. You just pop it right before you drop a full wreck bomb on someone. That is really good. But it's in competition with Maelstrom, which is also insanely good. So, Hand of Justice is still pretty good, even though it's better for sealed command pallies. It's still like a nice placeholder item. Briarwood, if you're just starting out and only have all healing gear, and you really don't have Jack, plus 29 spell damage is it's not too bad. Lightforge actually works pretty good with this build. If you're just gearing up and you got trash, you can get random spell power plate from 5-man dungeons, but if there's not spell power plate on the progressive server you're playing on, there's other options. And the really nice thing about Holy Reckoning and Spell Reckoning is they synergize pretty well with the Paladin PvP gloves. When I would say that those gloves kind of have bad synergy with almost every other build. Judging Crusader is actually somewhat a thing for Holy Reckoning and Spell Reckoning, where I think the burst of stunning a target with command, it's just not worth it. I would also in PvP people are bob and weaving so much you're gonna lose your 10-second judgment that can't be refreshed until you hit them again. So, but however, that being said, with Spell Reckoning, I do feel like the PvP gauntlets are realistically a thing, which is really nice because it makes rank 12 for paladins pretty damn strong. So I'll give you an example. You can go 5-piece tier 2, get the spell power, and then say you're still missing like one of the belt, gloves, or boots, so they're tier 2. You can pick up rank 12. You can get extra 20 stamina, which is your most important PvP stat, and you can get the gauntlets, which are still actually useful because you're putting plus holy damage to make your seal of righteousness do more damage. And I mean, it's just a great thing to have until you have maybe like 2.5. And you don't have to grind to rank 13 is the big thing. You can grind to rank 12 and it still serve a reasonable purpose for you. Okay, so more obscure stuff that is like really good is Nightfall. Now a lot of people are like, oh, Nightfall is like the PvE bitch weapon. You don't do any damage and you just make other people do more damage. Okay, there's some truth to that, but Nightfall is extremely powerful if you itemize for it correctly. So what you do is you get like a Nightfall, Wormthalic, life-stealing enchant, shadow oil, ZG trinket, or Maelstrom. Just procs after procs and things that help procs do more damage. It's looking pretty brutal. I mean, just think of this for example. Like, let's say you don't have any of that. You just have a Nightfall and a Gnomish Death Ray. Okay, you wreck bomb someone. That's over 11 chances to proc the Nightfall instantaneously. You have 5 white hits, 5 Seal of Righteousness hits, and a Judgment. So you proc the Nightfall while they're still stunned, and then you Death Ray them for 15% more damage on top of that. And that's with like almost, once you have the Nightfall, a Death Ray is easy to get. So Nightfall is not a bitch weapon. For Holy Reckoning, it's awesome. Even it's 3.5 speed, but it's still awesome. And another item, let's go over another obscure item that has insane potential. Edward the Odd. Edward the Odd is a godsend in certain dueling matchups. If you're 0, 25, 26, no healing combat Vanguard spec, where, I mean, this applies for Holy Reckoning too, but there's lots of different builds it's good for. You can't heal very well in combat, you're fighting a feral druid. If you have the right blessings on with the right itemization, a feral druid can never kill you. You just seal wisdom, get your mana back, and you insta heal for like 2.1k easily higher. That's without a crit. So yes, Edward the Odd has insane dueling potential and amazing tanking potential. Like, let's say you're in Strath Undead, you can AoE Holy Wrath all the mobs to get aggro without even casting. Instant cast Holy Wrath, or instant cast max rank heal on yourself, get tons of aggro while you're already doing everything else you normally do to grab aggro. Edward the Odd It's a god tier, but people please don't buy it because I'm saving up for one. So give me one or have mercy on me. Okay, I already kind of said it before, but Blood Drinker. There's rumors that a paladin named Thelalos on Anathema has gotten that sucker to crit for 3,000. 3,000, the proc. Not the white hits, not added everything together. Just the weapon proc. Okay, 3,000, and it's a goddamn lifesteal. Now, I'm sure he was like buffed out of his holy mind, but it's a 3,000 lifesteal proc. It's so goddamn broken. And then the last like obscure thing people don't really think about is Frost Oil, Shadow Oil. There's not many melee classes that use spell power. Holy Reckoning, Spell Reckoning obviously do. These procs proc extremely often for paladins because Seal of Righteousness, depending on what server you are on, will increase your proc chance greatly. It'll also proc off your judgment depending on what server you're on. And if you're on a server where it doesn't increase it, there's other upsides to those servers, but I'm not going to get into that. But for now, just know like Elysium, most popular vanilla WoW server, you get literally like 60% more procs on your Shadow Oil and Frost Oil. And the crazy thing about this is it stacks with spell power. Like in your in-game suit, your Shadow Oil procs that are going to be pretty much chain gun procking do 345 damage with your ZG trinket up. Just on a weapon proc alone. Like it blows the 2% crit, the sharpening stone out of the water. A trend I wanted to start is I wanted to start calling anything that had like 21 points in Holy and Reckoning, Holy Reckoning. And anything that's like 0, 25, 26, and using spell power, I would like to call Spell Reckoning because there's differences to them and they have different strengths and weaknesses, and I think we need to start giving them different names and normalizing those new names because like if you look at some of my old videos on my old channel with my really good friend S-Fan, you can see me wreck bombing people and stuff. I was actually more spell reckoning in a lot of those clips. So, it's a little confusing, but don't worry, because like Holy Reckoning still does a ton of damage and possibly superior in 1v1s. Well, I would consider Spell Reckoning superior if you're in a dedicated position that's more catered for that. Like if you're like the Vanguard unit, the guy who's running out there getting hit, killing their healers, I would consider Spell Reckoning, better for that. Okay, so I've talked a lot about how cool this spec is, how versatile it is. It can actually do damage, it's fun, you can do well in pre-mades. It's all around good spec. So now we need to talk about like how do you get started? You have a fresh 60 paladin, just green crap, just barely hit 60. I would go for 6-piece Lightforge. Like a Lionheart helmet. So with precision on Lionheart, that's your 5% hit chance maxed out. And then pretty much for my last piece of armor, I would just get whatever piece I'm having trouble farming. So let's say you just had terrible luck and you never get the legs. Just pick up some Eldritch legs from DM West. Or terrible luck and you can't get, I don't know, whatever piece, then just fill it in with something else. as the game, like the server I'm playing on, there's literally like no spell power plate. If you can get a whole bunch of spell power plate, um, because it's maybe a later release date or more progressed, go ahead and get all offset spell power plate. So why 6-piece Light Forge? Well, if you look at it, it has a giant spell power proc that procs quite often. Also, I'm a big fan of 6-piece Valor for starting out, but Valor stacks a lot better with Ret Reckoning, whereas Holy Reckoning you really need Intellect, even just for dueling, because the build's based around more healing yourself and healing other people around you, where doing damage is just kind of something you do on the side. Starting weapons. The first one that comes to mind is the Knicker. It's a 4.0, which is extremely important, and I would say that your DPS matters a little bit less with Holy Reckoning of your weapon than just about any other build compared to delay. Like we all know, for Serial Command you want a high delay weapon, but there gets a point where, like Bone Reaver's Edge, for example, is going to be better than Unstoppable Force. I mean, it's just too much white DPS that you're losing. And if the top end's high enough, you can actually be losing command damage too. However, with Holy Reckoning, a lot of your in-between time, you're throwing up flash of lights. So it's almost as if your weapon speed just doesn't matter at all. Like usually when you're trying to kill someone, you're going for a big burst. So now that's just one of the three things. You're tossing out little heals, and then you're going for that one big burst when you have your stacks. So it really doesn't matter how fast your weapon is. But next is Seal of Righteousness and how it scales. It scales pretty damn hard with attack speed. So a very slow weapon will hit harder per swing, which normally is not really a big deal, because if you don't have Reckoning, it's like, well, I'll just attack faster, it makes up for it. But if you have Reckoning, that's literally all free damage. So if you have like Lava Durger, whatever the hell it's called, 2.8, whatever super fast weapon, I don't even know what speed it is, and you get hit and get 2 counters or something, you gain 2 attacks that are scaled to that attack speed, which is going to be so much less damage than something scaled to something like the Knicker. So ironically, like weapons with insanely worse DPS, especially for Holy Reckoning, more than any other build, are just complete garbage. If you're doing the 2-hand thing, like I said, there's lots of 1-hand variations and stuff where there's more important things than trying to burst someone in the middle of a high-end pre-made. But we're talking about the fun spec, the fun way to equip yourself. Also, with Ret Reckoning Seal Command, you can only ever proc one command proc. Whereas Seal of Righteousness, the bonus for high delay is literally on every single hit. And how you're stacking your gear is different. You're picking up spell power, accessories, and items. So those procs are a bigger percentage of your overall damage, whereas your white hit is smaller. So yet another reason why it's extremely important to have high delay for Ret Reckoning as well. It's just amplified for Holy Wreck and Spell Wreck. Okay, now we have to talk about like early game accessories for Holy Reckoning. Obviously, if you're pre-made, as much plus healing as possible. But back to pugging solo kind of builds, you're gonna want to pick up things like maybe a Maiden Circle. But even that, for the price, I still wouldn't pick it up. It's too expensive for something that doesn't give you any stamina. The thing is, you want spell power, but let's face it, spell power items are expensive. So what can we do as a cheap alternative to keep you, effective and strong in PvP? Go for stam items. Just real easy to get. Sergeant's Cloak, Sergeant's this, Sergeant's that. Stamina is the bargain stat that you're going to want to hunt for early on. Not exactly the cheapest, but Myrmidon's Signet, the ring, the epic one. It's a really nice, well-rounded, stam-heavy ring. And then maybe combine it with the Ogre ring from DM North, or Bandit Flash from Strath Undead. Just stamina. Stamina is much better for Holy Reckoning than strength or agility, as a lot of your damage won't scale with that at all. And another item when you get the rep for it, that's not really exactly starter gear, but the Warsong ring, Lorekeeper's ring, mana regen is pretty good in PvP, as you need to cleanse a lot and not actually heal. And you have to do other things other than just healing. Unlike PvE, you almost exclusively just heal. And then it has spell power, and then it has stamina, which I would consider that like a perfect item. For this video, I'm not going to talk about Holy Reckoning late game items so much. I will quickly mention, itemization, tier 2, 2.5, spell power plate. You get the idea, but I will save going into greater detail for when I cover Spell Reckoning. I just think that's a good way to divide it up, because before you have a lot of gear, you need to play your spot as a healer on teams, so people will want you. Once you have all the gear and you just want to kill everyone, that's when you get to play a little bit more into the ret tree. Well, that's it for now, guys. The gear I have in this video, it's pretty suboptimal. As you can tell, I'm wearing Lightforge most of the time. It gets way better, but you get the idea. And I kind of want to show it early on, because that's like where a lot of y'all will be starting anyways. Alright, Deus Vault. Good luck, guys.